Big news from Nissan. We finally have the production version of the Nissan Z, and I'm wearing my Nissan 240Z t-shirt. This is actually our best-selling t-shirt since it was launched. If you're interested in checking this out, go to thesketchmonkey.com. Now, we're going to talk about some of the spec and tech of the Nissan Z here, and I'm going to compare it. What actually changed here from the concept, the Z Proto, to the production? Because as I expected from the start, when I saw the Z Proto, it looked like a production-ready car. And I think Nissan just put it out there to get some feedback and kind of gauge the reception for how people would feel about the car before they actually said, okay, people like the car, let's just put out the production version. It's going to be exactly the same. And that's pretty much what happened. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech here of the new Z. It will be priced at pretty much the same price as the 350Z was priced at in 2003. And it shares the same wheelbase as the 2020 370Z. We're going to talk more about the connection with the 370 when we talk about the interior. I'm going to let you know what I think about that. It now has 400 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque from its twin-turbo 3-liter V6. And guess what? I think you know this already, but it comes with a 6-speed manual. There is no 0 to 60 miles per hour numbers yet, but you can be sure that it will be as quick or maybe even quicker because on paper it has more power than the Toyota Supra and it's a lot lighter than the Infiniti that has the same engine as this. So it will probably have the same 0 to 60 time as the Supra or even quicker. The Supra does it in 3.7 seconds. When the 2023 Nissan Z goes on sale next spring, you will be able to choose between two different trim levels, the Z Sport and the Z Performance. They both have the same powertrain and both will get the full 12.3-inch customizable instrument display. However, the Z Performance is enhanced and upgraded where it really matters, as the name suggests. In the Performance, for example, you get a stiffer suspension in the Performance, a limited slip differential, larger brakes, and also automatic launch control. You also get upgraded 19-inch wheels with the Performance and 275mm wide rear tires for a more planted look, and more on this. Also, this is something we're going to talk about in just a minute when we go into the design of the production version. There is a third trim level, but I'm not taking this as a standard trim level because they will only build 240 units of it, and that is called the Proto Spec. I love that name of the trim level. As the name suggests, it's based on the Z Proto. It will be basically a Z Performance with the same colors that we saw on the Z Proto concept car. So you have yellow paint, a black roof, bronze wheels, and yellow brake calipers, and I think it looks great in that spec. And as I said, the reason I'm not counting this as a full trim level is that I think it will most likely be all sold out of the Proto spec the first day the 2023 Nissan Z goes on sale. Now, let's jump into Photoshop here, and I'm going to compare. The production is going to be on the top. The Z Proto is going to be on the bottom, and let's see if we can find. This is going to be like find 5 differences or whatever it's called. You know, when you have two different pictures next to each other, and you're supposed to find the differences. I feel that's what we're doing right here because it's such a similar design to the Z Proto, and that is great. I love it. I love when car companies actually do this and don't tease like the FT1. It's called FT1, the Supra concept, which some people say isn't the Supra concept because it was called the Supra, but if you look at the design, it's basically the same graphics, completely different proportions. That's why I was so disappointed at first when the Supra came out. I thought it was going to be an FT1 proportion style Supra, but hey, forget about that. We're talking about the Z here today. So what I want to show you here is I love the treatment of the tail lights here and the panel, because this panel, if you know your Zs, you know that this is clearly inspired by the 300ZX. They made a bunch of different versions of the design of the Nissan Z here when they designed this, when it was in development. They took styles from both the 370, more parts from this 300ZX, a little more from the 240, and then just mixed it together, and it must have been such a fun project to be a part of, to design the new Z. And I think the result here with the mix of different styles from different eras in design, and that's exactly what they wanted to do with the new Z here, is to take inspiration from the early 240Zs all the way up to the 370Z, implemented in the proper Z proportions, which we're going to show you here when we talk about the side view as well. So these taillights are obviously inspired by the 300ZX. I think it looks great, very narrow. I think the black part that stretches from one end to the other, what that does is it gives it a wider look. It gives it a wider stance, and the car looks wider than it actually is. But other than that, we have a wing here now on the production version. I'm not sure if I would pick the wing. Let me know if you would choose the wing on your Nissan Z here. It looks good, but at the same time, I'm just in love with this Z roofline that sits lower in the rear than it does in the front. On the original 240Z, that's what made it so special in a profile, is that this line right here, which was actually lower than the front on the 240Z, and that what made it look like it kind of abruptly just stopped, and like it was cut with a sword in the rear end, looking at it from a side view. And we also have now production things that need to be put into a production car to make it legal. We have this little light right here that's missing on the Z Proto. We also have a little lock here. This is functional stuff that needs to be on production cars, obviously. But the main thing here that I want to talk about, that I talked about when I made a video on the Z Proto, is I knew this was going to happen. We lose the stance of the car. You can see here that this is how I want the wheels to sit. Here we have them sitting inside the car. Some of you said that it's because it's going to rub if it bottoms out completely, but that's not true. This will not rub if it goes through a massive bump. The wheel will still be tucked inside there, even though it sits a little further out than we have here. And this is super important when you talk about sports cars. That's why I put the 275s on my Tesla, for example. I couldn't stand the rear just sitting in the body of the car, looking at it from a rear view. You had to like go almost to a slight side view in order to see the wheel. I wanted the wheel to be in line with the fender, and that's what we have on the concept here, and that's what's lost on the production version here. But at the same time, it is not a big deal, because what we can do, let me show you how quickly you can fix this. We can just put some spacers on this 2023 Z here, maybe some little larger wheels, and then we can just push them out a tiny bit, a couple of inches, something like this, and boom, the problem is solved. It's really not a big deal. A very easy solution to fix this. That's something I would definitely do myself if I bought this car, and I'm very tempted to buy it because it's 40 grand for all this. The 40 grand is for the Z Sport trim, but you still get the same powertrain and the same transmission and everything. So it's a really good deal in my opinion. I'm going to tell you exactly how they managed to get it such a good deal. So let's have a look at the side view here. Same thing here. It kind of loses the wheels, doesn't really fill out the wheel houses like I want and like it does on the concept, the Z Proto here, but at the same time, same thing here. It's a very easy fix. All we got to do is just make the wheels a little bigger and make them a little closer to the fender, and that will solve the problem. Specifically in the rear end, it needs to have be a little beefier in the rear end, and I would probably just put the lettering like this onto these wheels. I love this white lettering here. It just has a retro feel and a more of a race feel to the graphics. A tiny change that I think would really suit the production version as well, since they're basically the same car anyway. One thing that I love about this is a tiny detail that I really think is important here on the Z Proto that is lacking on the production car, is this part right here. I don't like when this happens. When you look at it from a side view, you can see that the body kind of hangs loose here, and it doesn't have support filling something in here that we do have on the Proto. So this is something that I don't know how you would fix that, if you could put something there, because that would annoy me if I looked at it from a side view. It makes it look weak, and it doesn't look like it's sitting on a platform. It looks like a shell on top of something, some parts, if that makes sense. One of these small changes that also I think would make a big difference, at least in my book, when it comes to having the car look planted, is to fill up this space right here and fill out the wheelhouses correctly or better than we have on the production car. Still two very small changes, but I'm just nitpicking here, finding the things that I would like to change on the production version compared to the Proto. So last but not least, let's have a look at the front view. I don't think we have any other changes on the side view here. Looks almost, I mean, the body shape is pretty much the same 3D model that you just threw into production. So let's have a look at the front view here. And this is interesting because when I saw the leaked photos of the actual production version of the Nissan Z, I noticed that the grille had a different shade to it. And I wasn't sure if that was just the lighting in those specific images or photos, or if it's actually had a lighter shade to it than we saw on the Z Proto. And I thought that was a great idea because this, as you know, there was a lot of talk about this square intake right here. I think it looks pretty fine. I mean, this is going to be one of these cars, just as a Supra, which is going to have thousands of body kits and modifications done to it. I think that's part of the whole spirit of the Z cars and also the Supras. But this kind of breaks it up in a better way, and it doesn't make the square look so imposing. Now it looks like the grille is actually this part right here, just like we have on the 240Z, which was separated by a chrome bumper, but we can't put a chrome bumper on today's cars. How do we separate the big grille in the front? We do it by the magic and power of graphics, and that's exactly what they did here. You can see that this has, in fact, a lighter shade than this part right here on the Z Proto. So that's one of the feedbacks that I think Nissan got when they released the prototype, was that there was a lot of talk about the square in the front end. So I think before they released the production version, they said, how can we make this less imposing and less of just a simple grille in front that's square? Let's just play around with graphics and let's play around with different types of colors and tones in the front to break this big geometrical feature in the front, break it up graphically. Another thing that I'm seeing here is another production thing that they need to put in is some sort of orange indicator or reflector right there, what we don't have on the prototype down there in the bottom. Other than that, I don't see any differences in the front end. We still have this beautiful hood, clearly inspired by the Nissan 240Z. And looking at the wheels here, you can also see that the stance is production stance up here, concept stance down here. But that's okay, as I said, because it's just an easy fix. I love that they kept this silver line here to emphasize the Z line even more. Perfectly done by the designers. The reason why they could get this down to $40,000 is something I talked about before as well. This is pretty much based on a modified platform that still the 370Z exists on, and you can definitely see that in the interior. And I made a video on that, comparing the 370Z interior with the Z Proto. And the Z Proto interior looks pretty much identical to the production version. If you've been driving a Z car before, you're definitely gonna feel right at home. But I mean, what's to complain about if it looks like a 370Z? I love the placements of things in the 370Z. What I didn't like that much was that everything, the materials and the layout and the buttons, they felt kind of aged. And that's exactly what's been changed here. Now we have a full 12.3 digital instrument cluster. You have a digital screen in the middle, all the buttons, everything has been redone, new materials, but the layout is exactly the same as the 370Z. So I have zero complaints about this interior, and I also love that they chose to go with an option that is the old 70s blue interior in the production version. And this is something that I would definitely get if I was getting this car. I would definitely go for this old school vintage blue tone on the interior. I think it looks good. And doesn't this interior just look like you just want to get in and sit and drive this thing? You have the manual shifter and everything is kind of two-tone. You have the blue tone in the bottom, the black in the top. I can't see anything being really reflected in the windshield. No shiny materials, no luxury, just a pure driver's car. And that's why I'm so thankful for Nissan for actually building these type of cars in today's world, where these types of cars are being replaced, you know, by the hour by their electric new versions of themselves, but not the Z here. And I applaud Nissan for doing that, and I can't wait to see what people are going to do with their Nissan Zs. Put some wheels on it, maybe lower it a little bit, put some 285s, 295s in the rear, maybe have the nice little cut line there for the planted look in the rear end, maybe have a little bit of camber to it. It's gonna be a fantastic driver's car, and I look forward to seeing this out on the road.